I'm standing in front of one of my favorite buildings in Huntington Beach, the famous historic Main Street Library. Now, we know there are lots of great stories inside, but there are also some great hidden history secrets we'll learn about in just a minute. I'm Chris Epton. I'm a writer and a storyteller, the author of several books and many articles about Huntington Beach. And what I like best is uncovering history that you may not be familiar with. This is Hidden Huntington Beach. Libraries have always been important to Huntington Beach. In 1909, the city's first library was established at Main and Walnut, but in 1913, plans were underway to build a Carnegie Library at the corner of 8th and Walnut. A Carnegie Library is a library built with money donated by Scottish-American businessman and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. A total of 2,509 Carnegie Libraries were built in the United States between 1883 and 1929, and we had one right here. Susan Foster, managing branch librarian at the Huntington Beach Main Street Library, joined me at the site of the Carnegie Library. So Susan, here at the corner of Walnut and 8th, what's it like for you as somebody who helps run the Main Street Library to be standing right in the shadow of where the famed Carnegie Library used to stand more than 100 years ago?
It's amazing. I drive by this corner on my way to work every day. I never actually got out of my car to look and stand and get a perspective, but we are today, and it's amazing.
Yeah,
Great.
It was a gorgeous building. It was actually set back a good deal from the curb. Why don't we go inside? There's a courtyard at this apartment complex. We can go stand right where the library is sat. You want to do that?
Yes.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
So we would have been coming into the side of the Carnegie Library, coming back into this apartment complex courtyard. It's got to be kind of cool for you, right? To now be right by where the entrance would have been. Can you picture and visualize how that was?
I wish I could have come in on opening day.
I wish there was a sign back here or some sort of marker to let people who live here know. There's presumably kids here. What cool history to share with kids that this gorgeous library was once here. You've seen the pictures of when they took it down?
Mm-hmm. Very stressful for me.
Well, you know, there was a resident, a friend of the show, Diane, gave us these amazing photos. She was out there taking those pictures today. It was like 64, 65, I think, in the mid-1960s. And the fire department used it as kind of a, you know, a demolition project.
Practice for them.
Practice. And
put out fires.
yeah, it's a shame. That of all the buildings in town that could have been saved, this is like top 3 for me. This would have been amazing to have.
It's a waste.
But we still have an incredibly historic library that you run over on Main Street. This one's not here. Why don't we go look at the one you do run and check out some hidden history there? Sound good? Okay.
Yeah.
I love visiting the Main Street Library, especially today when we're going to learn a lot of hidden history. It was dedicated in September of 1951. This library served as the main library from 1951 up until April 1975, when the Central Library at Central Park was finished. The architectural firm of McClellan, McDonald, and Marquith designed the Main Street branch as part of the Civic Center. The Huntington Beach Public Library on Triangle Park, known as the Main Street Branch Library, was placed on the National Register of Historic Places by the United States Department of the Interior on April 16, 2013. Susan, the first thing, I'm looking at a 1951 copy of the Huntington Beach News. There's a photo of the Carnegie Library, where we were just over by the site earlier, and the caption says, "Library service ends." The vine-covered brick structure, which for 38 years has served the city of Huntington Beach as a library, now is being vacated, and the library will be established in a $122,000 structure nearing completion in the city's Civic Center. That's where we are right now. It says, future of the attractive old building, referencing the Carnegie, is uncertain. It may be offered at auction. That building, before we talk about this magnificent building, that building sat there for a couple of decades, and well, actually not a couple of decades, almost a couple of decades, into the 1960s, so maybe about 15 years or so. And as we referenced earlier, there were some captures of what it looked like when the fire department used it as a controlled burn. And it really, looking at these images, it's really kind of haunting, don't you think, to know that that wonderful stately building was so unceremoniously demolished like that. But you know, all that said, without this happening, we wouldn't be here today. And we are sitting in a very special building, a very historic building, and you've put together, I think, some really nice artifacts to look at. Before we get to the books, let's talk about these a little bit, because these are artifacts that get to the people who worked here at the library 100 years ago. What is this exactly?
Yes, these are all written by Bertha Proctor. She was I think she was the first librarian in the Carnegie back in June of 1920. And this is how much we paid for the gas bill, and that was the electricity bill.
So these would have been over, not here at this library, but these go back to the Carnegie Library. And so that year, the gas bill in June of 1920 was $9.20. That was the gas bill. The electricity bill was close, a little bit under $8.64, more than 100 years ago. I want to be careful holding these because obviously these are pieces of treasure, all the original signatures. These are originals, right? These aren't copies. So we want to be very careful with these.
Here is a record of what she made in 1920. I think that was a monthly salary.
$100. So about $1,200 a year in 1920 for her to be the librarian for Bertha Proctor.
Yes, and I think I saw something from June 1922 as she had gotten a raise of about $75.
The telephone bill in 1920 was $2.25 for the month. Everything's relative, I guess. I'm sure they were thinking it was very high back then.
And on 100 years inflation.
Right, but it really is something holding artifacts like this that take us back to the Carnegie Library. And what do you have here?
Well, this envelope is 101 years old. I have to be really ginger holding it. It is... Oh, it's paying the gardener.
So we're paying the gardener in 1920. How much is the gardener making? Can we see?
$30?
$30 probably for the month, I would guess. Again, not cheap necessarily, but that kind of speaks to how ornate sort of the area, the landscaping was around the Carnegie Library. Again, great artifacts from the Carnegie, but then we've got some pictures, interior shots of the Carnegie, which I've never seen before, which look to be after the building was abandoned. I'm guessing, kind of hard to say, but we see the auditorium, we see the kitchenette, or kitchen rather, and some other images here which are fascinating. And you've got, these are fascinating to me. The first thing, the Register of Borrowers. So this would be a book of the people who came in, and it's a catalog of what book everybody checked out, right? Or the people who checked them out and where they lived. Is that right?
I think it's just a person who has a library card.
Okay, so a member.
Name and
Okay,
address.
so these are the borrowers. These are the people who would have come in and taken books out. And you know, we can thumb through these. There are thousands of names in here. Everyone puts their address down. It's funny, I'd like to go track down all these addresses and see if the homes are still there. You know, looking through, of course, our eyes are trying to pick up a name like, you know, Slater or Talbert, Newland, things like that. I don't see those yet, but you know, we'll see a name like C.W. White. Our good friend Cindy White, who lives in the city, who's got a great legacy here, that could be connected to her. So with your permission at some point, I think it would be fun to catalog all of these names and addresses and maybe create kind of a walking tour based on this. Now this is a little bit earlier. We're talking here in terms of years, what are we talking, 1920s for this book, I believe?
Oh, it says on the first page here.
Let's see.
1937.
37. Now you've got books that go back earlier than this as well, much earlier. So why don't we look at this borrower's book? So we start looking at this. We have a book from, let's see here, 1924. It takes us back to all of the people who borrowed books from the library in 1924. So we go back and again can now see who was borrowing books, where they lived, almost 100 years ago. And then additionally, you've got a book here. I love this one as a writer. Myself, I love the fact that you've got this log. Describe what this is.
It's an accession book, which basically
1919.
means, yes, March 27th, 1919, over 100 years. And it's basically a list of the books the library had at that time.
All of the books. So we see Walt Whitman in here. I mean, we see some pretty well-known names. The publisher of the book, the number of pages, the year it was published, a really thorough, you know, for its time, a very thorough accounting of all of the books that were at the Carnegie Library, right? You know, you've got other photos here that are that are fascinating. This one, to me, it's a great shot of what the library looked like. For all of the great photographs you've got here, this library to me really is kind of one part museum. You've got these artifacts, you've got this wonderful photographic display, but you've also got an artifact that for me is it's kind of the ultimate library artifact in this city because it connects us to the Carnegie Library, and it's sitting right behind us. If you would take us over and show us what's on a table, because this to me is one of the most special city artifacts in existence. Okay, Susan, what do we have here?
Well, I know you're excited about this.
I really am.
This, at one point, was attached to the actual cornerstone back here.
So we don't know where the cornerstone is, though, right?
No, I don't.
Any guesses of where it might be?
Well, I looked upstairs. It's not there. It might be in the basement of the Central Library, or maybe in a basement somewhere at City Hall.
Well, this is kind of cool. So now we've got another mission to come out and find what this was affixed to, right? And as you can see, it just says 1914, 1951. It marks the original cornerstone. I love that. That's historic in its own right. But what about this?
That's the actual plaque that was hanging or mounted in the old Carnegie Library. And it's got these, I don't know how these attached, and it's really heavy too.
Yeah, no, it is. We moved it over here. Thank you for letting us move it.
Normally they're stored over in the display case to the left of the entrance.
So people can see this when they come in. This is on display all the time
and
when the library is
people always look
open.
at it. They always notice it.
This is so special. This is an actual physical connection to the old Carnegie Library. I'm so glad this is here. I'm glad to keep it on display. What I want to do now, speaking of special plaques and markers, let's go out front and read something that identifies this building today as part of a very, very special list in American history. Shall we?
Sounds good.
Susan, I remember back in 2013 helping to get the paperwork together. It was a real privilege to make sure that this library became part of the National Register of Historic Places. And thanks to the efforts of a lot of people, it happened. What does it feel like to know that you've got at least some measure of protection for the library?
It's a wonderful feeling that I know they can't tear the place down. We can't even put nails in the inside of the building.
Right, everything's got to remain kind of as it was.
Yes, it was.
A lot of rules. But good rules that helps protect and preserve everything.
Fine, yeah.
In addition to all of the history here, it extends beyond the library. You're located in Triangle Park, which for more than 100 years has been an integral part of the community. There were the renowned horseshoe courts here, the croquet courts. This has always been kind of a center of play and study and history. It's got to be interesting for you knowing that every place where you come to work every single day, that all of this happened here.
I personally feel that I work in the best department of the city, which is the library.
Why is that?
Because I'm here in this beautiful library. It's a historic landmark. I love history. It's one of my great interests, in addition to books.
And libraries, for me, they're the lifeblood of any community.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to supplying people with their fiction reading interests and any other informational needs they might have, I'm also going to be starting a small little archive where I'm going to be collecting and preserving some of the treasures that I found upstairs in the library.
Wonderful. Well, keep us posted. We'll come back. I want to thank you for walking us through so much great library history today, starting at the Carnegie. It really is, again, I can't encourage you enough to come out, explore Triangle Park, visit the library. It really is a wonderfully historic site. And if you want to join our Facebook group, which is simply called Hidden Huntington Beach, we've got thousands of people there sharing hundreds of stories and photos and home movies. It's a lot of fun. We look forward to seeing you there and look forward to seeing you back here on the next edition of Hidden Huntington Beach.